Hello everyone and welcome to Vere Cold Lasagna. I am your host, Dylan Lasagna, and this is episode number 265 of this icy yet spicy podcast for all your filthy casual takes on the world of sports for you casual fans out there like you and me. In this episode, we're here. It's officially WrestleMania week, and while it doesn't feel like WrestleMania week, that being WrestleMania 41 specifically, nor have we felt like we're on the current road to WrestleMania, but we have taken the liberty in these last couple episodes of the podcast to go on a retro road to WrestleMania and looking back at some of the best and some of the worst the WrestleManias that I've reviewed here on Vere Cold Lasagna. And with the upcoming WrestleMania coming up real soon in a short order amount of time, we have to wrap up and make our final pit stop on this retro road to WrestleMania by taking one last pit stop in the site of where WrestleMania 41 will be at, because this is actually the second time where this particular WrestleMania is going to be at. So, in honor of this upcoming WrestleMania, we have to look back at the first time WrestleMania was in Las Vegas, Nevada. And that WrestleMania was one that, so many people remember for certain reasons. And that WrestleMania was WrestleMania IX back in 1993. You're probably wondering, for all my audio listeners out there, what the heck are you wearing? What the heck are you wearing, Dylan? And for my audio listeners out there, I will tell you exactly what the heck I am wearing. So, as you can tell, I am wearing a quote-unquote toga. Yes, it is a toga. Yeah, because why exactly am I wearing a toga? Well, it is the world's largest toga party, pal. We're back in 1993, and on this particular WrestleMania, it was the world's largest toga party. So we gotta fit in, pal. We really gotta fit into this toga party if you want to get into this particular WrestleMania that was held in Las Vegas in the Roman Coliseum. And, well, we just got to fit right in. So, yeah, before we review this specific WrestleMania, a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Follow Vere Cold Lasagna on social media, on X and Instagram at Vere Cold Lasagna. And for all my audio listeners out there, make sure to rate and review the show wherever you get your podcast. And for the people watching on YouTube, make sure to smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, make sure you subscribe if you're not already, and leave your takes down below in the comments section below in this particular topic. It's about WrestleMania IX and what you remember about the show. And it should be an interesting discussion if you happen to come across this episode. And I would really love to know your insights, whether it's good or bad, about this particular WrestleMania. And I'm sure there'll be some interesting ones. And as always, share this with your friends, share this with your neighbors, share this with whoever's around you, whether it's at work or school. Whoever you want to share this with. Share the good, the bad, the ugly about this podcast entitled Vere Cold Lasagna. So that being said, let's get into this rather interesting, for all certain reasons, WrestleMania IX. So this WrestleMania took place in Las Vegas, Nevada. So this is the first WrestleMania that took place in Las Vegas. That's why we're reviewing it in honor, and I say this in air quotes, is as part of, the upcoming WrestleMania that's going to take place in Las Vegas. So this took place on April 4th, 1993 at Caesar's Palace, the hotel that was. And there's a little bit of correction that I have to do for the last episode where I reviewed WrestleMania 26. So this was actually not only was this the first time that this WrestleMania was the first time this was outdoors, but prior to WrestleMania 26, it was actually WrestleMania 24, and this WrestleMania specifically, to be the only two to be held in open air venues, to be completely outside. So I was wrong when I said this WrestleMania, WrestleMania 9, and WrestleMania 19 were completely outdoors. So correction on that. That was my error. So I just want to apologize for that for any of you historians out there that want to come in here and jump in on me if you somehow have to come across this podcast. So anyway, back to the little notes and factoids about this WrestleMania. So, like I said, this is the first ever WrestleMania to have been done so completely outside at the time. Hence why it was so bright. For all you East Coast haters out there that want to rag on the West Coast, and for WrestleMania having the old so lovely sunshine. But anyway, I digress. So this WrestleMania in particular was notable for a lot of things, aside from the stuff we're going to talk about later on. So anyway, this WrestleMania was the only one to be entirely based on a theme. Hence why I'm wearing this, pal. This theme was based on the Romans, the Roman Empire, and it was also based on the hotel that Caesar's Palace was based on, the Romans. So as such, the WWF featured a lot of things like Roman guards. You even had live animals like elephants, ostriches. You even had the ring announcer, Howard Finkel, renamed for that day, Fincus Maximus. And you also had the commentators, wear what I'm wearing right now for all my video people and my audio people out there. Togas. But they had actual togas. I mean, I have an actual toga. No, I'm just kidding. No, I don't. And the entire arena, which I'll get into as well, it was made to look like the Roman Colosseum, which I really liked. I really liked the presentation of this WrestleMania. So in short, it was the world's largest toga party as they promoted it. And yeah, it was a very interesting presentation. So this WrestleMania was also notable for the debut of eventual legendary wrestling announcer Jim Ross. Jim Ross was with WCW earlier that year, but he had left for contractual reasons, and also creative differences with Eric Bischoff. So Jim Ross came over to the WWF, and this happened to be his very first day on the job, WrestleMania IX. And he was also wearing a toga. Yeah, imagine that being part of your first day on the job. So this is also an interesting time for the WWF, because when you look at it from a grander scale of things, the early to mid 1990s was not just a significant shift in terms of where the times were in not just America, but around the world. But for wrestling in particular, it was a significant transitional period for the WWE. Many of the top stars like Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, The Ultimate Warrior, the Honky Tonk Man, they were all gone. They either moved on, retired, or they had other various reasons to leave the WWE. And they were replaced in favor of newer, younger stars like Bret the Hitman Hart, The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Razor Ramon, all those guys. So, in short, it was time for a change. Expedie oil change. All the commentators on the Giants regional broadcast like to say. So, it was time for, in short, a new generation in the WWF. So, yeah, the WWF, it also was continuing to expand. They debuted Monday Night Raw 2 months prior in January 1993. But at the same time, something else was going on. Something else was brewing in a not so good way for the WWF at that time. The WWF at this time was undergoing a lot of bad publicity. And that was because of the increasing allegations of steroid abuse and sexual harassment. So not exactly, not a good time for the WWF. And there's still, I mean, outside of those behind the scenes bad PR, they were also losing a lot of money because when you look at that roster at the time, there weren't exactly a lot of people that were kind of into the new generation yet. Because the stars that I just mentioned, The Undertaker, HBK, Bret Hart, they weren't quite there yet. They weren't quite there yet in terms of the popularity with the previous guys. So they were losing a lot of money, along with the bad press that was coming out about those allegations. So you get to this WrestleMania. You get to WrestleMania 9. Vince saw this as a much needed shot in the arm to give the company some hopefully good PR, despite the dark cloud that was hanging over them at the time and soon to be hanging over them as the months wore on in 1993 and beyond. for the next couple of months and years. I also forgot to mention I was initially supposed to review this back 2 years ago as part of its 30th anniversary, but at the time in 2023, there's a lot of constraints. There's a lot of constraints, and I don't want to make any excuses. This is my bad. I had the season recaps that I was still trying to wrap up, trying to do, and then at the time I was prepping to go down south for WrestleMania, and then there was some other behind the scenes stuff that's happening in my life, so I scrapped it. I scrapped this WrestleMania IX review, the first one initially, but at the same time I found it as a blessing in disguise to do so, because here we are 2 years later doing it, doing this retro review for WrestleMania IX, because, well, WWE happened to do a behind the scenes documentary for this WrestleMania, and that was titled WrestleMania IX: Becoming a Spectacle. So they released that, and I also watched the documentary. So I watched both this WrestleMania in particular and the documentary. So I'll also talk about any bits and pieces from that documentary in relation to, and if it happens to relate to the match that we're going to talk about in this review. Speaking of matches, there was supposed to be a match that was going to happen on this pay-per-view between Bam Bam Bigelow and Kamala, but they canceled it due to time constraints. So I learned a little factoid about that. So with all that out of the way, we can finally talk about the show itself. And it all started with a dark match. Yes, a dark match to kick off the first WrestleMania in Las Vegas between Papa Shango, the future Godfather, taking on Tito Santana. This match actually wasn't released until 2019 on the WWE Network in a Hidden Gems section, or like a Hidden Gems compilation. And I'm actually glad to God that they released it, because otherwise, well, I wouldn't really have much to say about it. And I kind of still don't have much to say about it, because I mean, it was a decent match. It was a decent tone setter for the people that were filing in. They were pretty much into it at the time, from what I can gather. So it got everyone warmed up, both literally and both, I guess, mentally for the show. It was pretty much a back and forth affair. Tito Santana overcame the bigger Papa Shango in I guess a decent tune-up match for what was to come for the rest of the show. So the finish saw Papa Shango miss a flying elbow, and Santana took advantage of that, pinned Shango to win this match. And this was also notable for this being Jim Ross's first match commentated for the WWF/WWE. But yeah, you can really tell. They even had Jim Ross's full commentary during this match. They had Jim Ross do commentary solo for this match to warm him up for the main show. And you could tell that this was Jim Ross's first time doing commentary for the WWF, because they even had instances where Jim Ross was acknowledging Bruce Pritchard in his headset. It's like, okay, I'll note that for later, or I don't know what this move is, but I'll ask you later, kind of thing. So yeah, you could clearly tell that Jim Ross was still trying to get his feet wet, not just for this actual show, but for later on, as he continued to find himself in the WWF at the time. So I found that to be kind of interesting. But for the match itself, I thought it was okay to get people warmed up for this WrestleMania. So now for the actual pay-per-view itself, the main show kicked off in, of course, the true spirit of this specific WrestleMania, where it was the world's largest toga party. Both Gorilla Monsoon and Jim Ross were wearing togas, and for some reason, people were kind of critical of this. I thought it to be kind of funny, to be honest with you. And like I said, Jim Ross having to wear a toga on his first day, like, I mean, hell, why not? Why not, pal? So, yeah, it really set the theme up for this WrestleMania, being the world's largest toga party. You want to be super extravagant, and you even had this extravagant opening ceremony featuring Cleopatra and Julius Caesar on an elephant. Yeah, you had a live elephant, and you didn't know what if something was going to go wrong. And thankfully, nothing went wrong with the live animals that were in this thing. Then you also had Macho Man Randy Savage, who wasn't wrestling at the time. He was on commentary. He was being elegantly escorted on a sedan, which was called a couch in Roman speak. And yeah, he was being escorted not just on a sedan, but by lovely, lavish women. And then you had Bobby the Brain Heenan, probably one of the funniest escorts during this opening ceremony. He was riding a camel backwards, and this is actually his idea. So I didn't know that. I thought they just fucked things up. I thought they fucked up the entrance, but no, this is actually his idea. And kudos to him. Kudos to him for making this fun. And then this is where our first documentary note comes in. So yeah, this is actually the first time that the WWF was this theatrical. They were this presentational. So they put this much effort into the presentation, and in rehearsals, they were all, like I said, they were all pretty worried on how it was going to turn out, because you had live animals. Like, you didn't know if something was going to go haywire, because they could only do so much to control them. Like, I'm not sure if they were trained or not, but like I said, you could only do so much when it comes to the live animals. But it was really interesting to see how much rehearsal time was into that opening ceremony. So after the opening ceremonies, after they introduced their newcomer Jim Ross, you get into the opening match, and that was the Intercontinental Champion Shawn Michaels taking on Tatanka. Not a lot of whole backstory into this match, which honestly is gonna pretty much be a running theme for this WrestleMania. So when it comes to this opener, Tatanka, he was this babyface tribal character, and he was in the middle of a 2-year undefeated streak. And he had defeated Shawn Michaels in singles action, earning him this title match. Now, Shawn Michaels, he was actually in a rising upper mid-carder at this point in time, after turning on Marty Jannetty, his former Rockers tag team partner. I believe it was if I remember correctly, it was like 1991 or 1992. A year or two prior. But anyway, and that was actually the bigger story at play, because HBK was also feuding with his former manager, Sensational Sherry, who turned on HBK as payback for him using her as a shield in getting hit with a mirror by his former partner, Jannetty, months prior. So that was pretty much the larger story at play, was Sensational Sherry coming out into Tonka's corner and pretty much providing a foil to, well, the debuting Luna Vachon. So Luna Vachon, actually, yeah, this was her debut. She signed on like a couple weeks prior to the WWF. And yeah, she was in HBK's corner despite Shawn Michaels basically ignoring her. Which pretty much brings me to my first question. Like, if Luna Vachon was basically there in HBK's corner, but Michaels was basically not acknowledging her, why even have her there? Why? So anyway, this match went on longer than honestly it needed to. I mean, it was a okay match, but I just didn't find the need for it to go on 8 minutes longer than it needed to, because a large chunk of this match was either Tatanka targeting Shawn Michaels' injured shoulder, or it was just HBK doing a bunch of rest holds, a bunch of chin locks on Tatanka. Now, there were some nice near falls towards the end of this match, mostly from Tatanka with the top rope crossbody, and then countering HBK's top rope dive into a power slam. But the few positives in this match were pretty much undone by not just the unnecessary length of this match, but then you had the finish of this match, which saw HBK pull the referee to the floor, and the ref, he pretty much waited for Tatanka to hit his finishing Samoan drop. And, well, rather than count the pin for Tatanka, he waited for Tatanka to hit his finisher, and he waited for Tatanka to pin HBK to ring the bell for a disqualification win for Tatanka. And that was because, well, HBK pulled the referee, and then the ref just waited. He waited until Tatanka went for the pin attempt. I'm like, why? That was so unnecessary and so botched that it made both guys look stupid. It made them look stupid. Like, I get it. They wanted to protect both guys since they were like on the rise and such. But Vince should have came up with something better. Like Luna attacking Tatanka, or the ref, like Luna attacking the ref instead. Like, do something like that instead of like this fuck finish where nobody looks good. Nobody looked good in this finish. So I really didn't get that. It made everyone look dumb. So post match, Luna Vachon attacks Sensational Sherry. She slammed her on the solid steel floor, and it took a couple of seconds because Tatanka was too busy celebrating with the fans. Like, hey everybody, come look at me while you see what's going on at ringside. And then it took Tatanka like a few seconds too late to see, and he ran off Luna Vachon before helping Sensational Sherry to the back. And that was a talking point for like an early part of the show. So that began a short-term feud for Sensational Sherry and Tatanka against Luna Vachon and Bam Bam Bigelow. That actually never blew off because Sensational Sherry was released during the summer because she went to cosmetology school and she failed some drug tests. And Luna Vachon actually legitimately got hurt. They never had a proper blow-off match. So this match, this was a very rough start to this WrestleMania. Like, you had an IC title match that just dragged on too long, and it ended in a disqualification. And probably one of the worst endings I saw. Like, the referee waited until Tatanka hit his finisher, and then he decided to like call disqualification right then and there. Like, what are you doing? You made everyone look stupid. So, moving on to the next match to further get that stupidity out of the way, the Steiner Bros, Rick and Scott, taking on Samu and Fatu of the Head Shrinkers. So there wasn't much, if any, story tied to this match, but there is some interesting background about these teams. So for the Head Shrinkers, their gimmick was that of being uncivilized savages. But little did I know that one of the Head Shrinkers, that being Fatu, was Rikishi. Yes, I did not notice at all. And I'm sorry for all the hardcore, diehard wrestling fans out there. I did not know this was Rikishi before Rikishi. The Rikishi we all knew. That Rikishi. I'm like, wow. Okay. Damn. Meanwhile, you have the Steiner Bros. And their whole gimmick was based around their actual amateur wrestling background and their accomplishments at their alma mater, the University of Michigan. So they were wearing varsity jackets, wrestling helmets, and all that jazz. And much like with much like with Rikishi, I didn't know this was Scott Steiner before the genetic freak we know him more of today. Yeah, like literally two guys. Like I grew accustomed with growing up more for their gimmicks during the Attitude and Ruthless Aggression era. They were much different during this time. They were much different. So like, damn, like what a crazy time. What a crazy time for both of them. I mean, you got to start somewhere, I guess. So when it comes to this match, the Head Shrinkers actually got the jobber entrance after you get this pre-match promo from the Steiner Bros. As for this match itself, it was pretty physical. But it just, like the match before, dragged on a little longer than it needed to. And it did feel a little disorganized at times. There wasn't really much flow to it. And I say disorganized because of the story being told. Scott Steiner being this babyface in need of help. And it was disrupted too often by Rick because he made himself look dumb by interjecting as the illegal man. And that was kind of another running theme. Like, all these baby faces, like in these tag matches, trying to insert themselves, and you have the referee, come in, push them back to their corner, and then you have the heels going, haha, hee hee, we're gonna cheat and attack the baby face behind the referee's back. So, I mean, I get they're trying to build up Rick's hot tag for the large chunk of this match, but it took a couple minutes too long to get there. It's like they could have told this by shaving off a couple minutes. But I will say the Steiners were very impressive here in this match, regardless, because they were energetic. They had some really cool spots in this match, like Rick's counter of the Doomsday device from the Head Shrinkers. And I think it was either Samu or Fatu that Rick countered that Doomsday device. He caught one of them midair into a power slam. I thought that was like one of the very few bright spots of this pay-per-view. And their amateur wrestling background really came into play. So Scott would wind up blind tagging back into the match. And after a back and forth with Samu, he hit the Frankensteiner, which was kind of like very rare at the time and also kind of dangerous too. He hit the Frankensteiner on Samu for the win. So I'd say it was a pretty decent match, but it kind of went on a little long. But the right team won. That's all that mattered. And I'd say by the halfway point, though, yeah, like I said, a little longer than necessary. And the fans in attendance over 30 years ago were getting kind of restless. But still, the Steiners, really good performance. It woke them up a bit, and they would go on to have some solid success afterwards. And that included winning the WWF Tag Team titles. So we go on to the next match, and that included Doink the Clown taking on Crush. I believe I talked about him a couple years ago when we did that SummerSlam retro review. So Crush, for those of you that are unaware, he had this Hawaiian gimmick after returning to the WWF, but he was previously a part of the well-known tag team Demolition. So Crush, he now had a Hawaiian gimmick, an easygoing surfer gimmick that feuded with the evil clown, Doink the Clown, over the tricks he was pulling on both him and the fans. So that included getting attacked by Doink with this hard prosthetic arm that caused him to miss the Royal Rumble, and that led to this match. So not too much of a setup, very simplistic, and yeah, that's pretty much what led to this WrestleMania matchup. So the story of this one, in terms of the match itself, it was pretty much Crush dominating this one because, well, Doink didn't have any tricks to turn to when it came to the actual match itself. So it was basically a long squash match for Crush and Doink. Even if Doink did get a little bit of offense in, it was pretty much all Crush until Doink caused a ref bump. So he did have one trick up his sleeve. So he shoved Crush into the referee. That led to a ref bump. And then Crush had Doink in his finisher, which was the head squeeze. I'm not sure what the actual name of his finisher was, but it was like the Khali vice grip that the great Khali did over a decade later. But then a second Doink clown appeared to hit Crush with that same prosthetic arm the real Doink did prior to this match. And then, yeah, you had this mirror illusion spot between the two Doinks, which I thought was kind of nice. And then the real Doink revived the referee to pin Crush to win. I thought it was a pretty meh match because, I don't know, I just didn't really like Crush. I didn't like him when I did the 1992 SummerSlam retro review, and I didn't like him here. And those two pay-per-views were like several months apart. Yeah, Crush was not, the Hawaiian was not really great. I will say the only positive I could give this match was Doink's antics, but yeah, this was probably the absolute worst of what we've seen so far when it comes to this WrestleMania. So then we had our next matchup of the night, and that was the bad guy, Hey Yo, Razor Ramon, taking on Bob Backlund. There was no story to this match at all. It was just two guys going at each other. And I guess the best way to describe this match was a battle between old school and new school. So this is actually the WrestleMania debut for both guys, especially like Bob Backlund. Like Bob Backlund really never wrestled WrestleMania prior to this. Like, really? I didn't know that. Like, even the commentators were pointing this out. Like, really, Bob Backlund never wrestled a WrestleMania before this? Seriously? Like, wasn't he a key part of the golden era? And he never wrestled a WrestleMania before this? Really? But anyway, Razor Ramon is one of the key parts of the key guys being pushed. Was going to be pushed into the new generation. Meanwhile, you have Bob Backlund. He hasn't wrestled in 8 years. I guess that's why he didn't wrestle WrestleMania. And he was trying for a comeback, but it was pretty obvious that his generation has passed him by. So Bob Backlund had no entrance music, despite being a veteran. And despite being the babyface, the fans in Caesar Palace were clearly more in favor of Razor Ramon. It was a even yet very short affair, and it was evident given how fast they were working each other. Razor Ramon picked up the win with an inside cradle, aka the fruit roll-up inside cradle. So yeah, I don't really have any much else to say about this because they only had less than 4 minutes to work with, and while Razor Ramon went on to have much more success than this, here he didn't really have anything else to work with. I mean, he was still on the up and up during this point in time. So other than that, I didn't really have much else to say about this match because it was just so short. It's just really that short. So moving on to our next matchup of this WrestleMania, it was the WWF Tag Team Champions, Money Inc., Ted DiBiase and Erwin R. Shyster, IRS, taking on the Mega Maniacs of Hulk Hogan and Brutus the Barber Beefcake. Brutus Beefcake, who was one of the WWF's most popular mid-card babyfaces in the Golden Era, he returned in February 1993 after a life-threatening parasailing accident nearly 3 years prior. And when I watched the documentary, it was a very brutal accident, and I feel for him. I really feel for the guy. But anyway, back to how this match unfolded. He was in a parasailing accident that nearly killed him. It pretty much almost killed him. And it put his career on hold, and he was looking for a comeback. Now he did appear occasionally in non-wrestling roles, but it was clear that he wanted to get back in the ring. So he did so. He did eventually come back, like I said, in February, and he was looking for a comeback. And he had his return match that same month against Ted DiBiase. Beefcake won by disqualification, and IRS attacked him and hit his reconstructed face with the briefcase, despite pleas from Money Inc.'s manager, Jimmy Hart. So that led to Jimmy Hart switching sides after trying to stop IRS from hitting Beefcake with the briefcase. And that also led to the return of Hulk Hogan. So Hulk Hogan, he hadn't been seen since the last WrestleMania VIII. He went on to pursue acting in some pretty bizarre movies, in my opinion. But he was also one of the high targets, one of the names that were dropped in the steroid allegations that the WWF was facing at the time. So he pretty much had to distance himself from the WWF, and he had to get off the juice as well. So anyway, yeah, when he came back, he came back and announced his intentions to form this tag team with Bruce the Beefcake and then have Jimmy Hart by his side to form the Mega Maniacs and set the stage for this tag team title match at this WrestleMania. Now, in the documentary, once Hogan was made official for this WrestleMania, the ticket sales rose back up. And yeah, prior to this, the ticket sales were not exactly doing that good. I'll talk a little bit again about the ticket sales when I have some other the section about what exactly I took away from the documentary. But yeah, when the tickets were first announced back in November, they had a little bit of 2,000 sold, but in the months following, not exactly good until Hulk Hogan was made official for this WrestleMania, and those tickets skyrocketed back up. So I guess in an essence, yeah, Hulk Hogan did kind of save this WrestleMania, but once we talk more about Hulk Hogan, there are other reasons why he didn't at the same time. So yeah, while Hulk Hogan was one of the stars of the WWF, he was like the most popular star for wrestling and just in general. But it also at the same time, it also set a weird precedent for the stars that were on the rise for the WWF at the time. So that was also proven as such when the promotion for this pay-per-view changed drastically from all the new gen wrestlers to just Hulk Hogan on all the promotion for this WrestleMania with less than a month to go. I do have to question though, like other than their previous team ups during the golden era, like in the late 1980s, like 1989 and prior to 1990, before the parasailing incident, did Hulk Hogan and Beefcake ever wrestle once in the lead up to this WrestleMania? I mean, prior to Hogan returning, did they ever wrestle as a team? Even on the house show circuit? Like, did they ever like wrestle? Like in the lead up to this WrestleMania? I mean, one would think so, because Hulk Hogan hadn't wrestled in like up to a year by that point. Prior to that, because you think that Hulk Hogan would wrestle to shake off some ring rust, and all they did leading up to this WrestleMania was saying, "Brother." Well, you actually had DiBiase and IRS actually go up there and tune up both in the ring and in promos. So one would think so, right? But the match, however, was in real danger of getting cut because Hogan severely injured his eye, and it was very visible. It was a very visible black eye, both throughout the show and then in the Becoming a Spectacle documentary. Like, Hogan was clearly trying to hide that thing. And it was also in serious danger. And this was another note from the Behind the Spectacle doc. It was in real danger of being canceled because Hulk Hogan had to pass a physical. He had to pass a physical from the Nevada State Commission. And if he didn't pass that physical, that match was going to get canceled. So Hogan did this thing where he had to convince the doctors to that he passed that physical, and they signed the note and then showed Vince McMahon, "Hey, I passed the physical, brother." And then the match went on as is. Now, going back to the black eye, there have been multiple stories throughout the years on how exactly that happened. One was Randy Savage punched Hogan because their real life issues when it came to Miss Elizabeth. And the other was Hulk Hogan getting into a jet ski accident days prior. And then the other was the WWF putting into the storyline about Ted DiBiase hiring a bunch of men attacking Hogan before the match. A lot of reasons why. As my toga's falling apart, but at this point, I don't really care. But anyway, yeah, a lot of theories why Hulk Hogan had that black eye. Which one do I believe? Honestly, none of my business. So the match itself, I'm going to take off this toga. The match itself, when you get to the theatrics of it all, Hogan, despite being gone for much of 1992, the pop was still there. The pop, when he came out, was as loud as ever. Fans were very happy to see him. And his partner, Brutus Beefcake, they were also happy to see him as well, because again, he also had his feel-good comeback story. And also note that Brutus the Barber Beefcake was also sporting this titanium face mask to sell his broken face injury that DiBiase and IRS gave him a month prior. And now for the match itself, they actually got into it before the bell rang while Hogan's music was still playing in the background, which was a choice. But despite never having teamed before prior to before a couple of years prior, and not having done matches in the lead up, Hogan and Beefcake showed some great teamwork. So yeah, in essence, it showed that their chemistry was still there together. And Hogan being away for almost a year, they dominated the tag team champions to the point Money Inc. tried to walk out of the match, but that plan backfired because the referee ruled that the champions were going to lose their titles if they didn't return by his 10 count. So they got back to the ring, and then Money Inc. began to dominate Hulk Hogan with their underhanded tactics. Again, going back to that cliche of, the babyface, this time being Brutus, trying to get into arguments with the referee and, trying to get into the ring when he's not the legal man. And then IRS and DiBiase attacking Hogan, going, ha ha, hee hee, we're attacking you while the referee's not looking. That cliche. So, yeah, it just made everybody look stupid. It made both the babyface team look stupid and the referee look stupid. Because again, it made it super easy for the heels to cheat in this match. So anyway, all four men locked each other in the $1 Million Dream, the sleeper hold. That was Ted DiBiase's finisher. So that was kind of dumb in my opinion because it just was so overkill. Now there was a ref bump towards the end of this match, but for whatever reason, the tags to both Ted and Hogan counted when it shouldn't have counted because that wouldn't fly in today's WWE, or just in wrestling in general. But the finish of this match, it was just. This is probably one of the other worst finishes I've ever saw as a wrestling fan. Like Hulk Hogan grabbed Beefcake's mask. Like they took off Beefcake's mask prior to this. And Hogan just went ham on the heels with it. Yeah, Hogan the babyface. He attacked the heels with the mask. And then both him and Brutus covered both of them with the ref down, mind you. There was still a ref bump going on. And then Jimmy Hart, the babyface manager, he inverted his jacket because it had stripes on it that resembled a referee shirt. And he pretended he was the referee to count the pin and awarded his team the tag team titles. What? And then, of course, there comes the second referee. And after further review, Finkelmus Maximus announced to the world, Money Inc. wins this match by disqualification. What? Okay. And then Jimmy Hart just throws the second referee out of the ring. They didn't care about the result. And then they celebrate with the fans for a really long time. I'm a real American. We don't give a shit about what happened. Like, there was nothing to celebrate for. You lost the match by disqualification because of your stupidity. Like, this was a stupid ending to a turn of a match. Like there's no flow. There was no ebbs. Like, there's nothing. I mean, everyone was nice to see Hulk Hogan, but by the time you got to the finish, everyone was just wondering, like, did this really just happen in front of our eyes? Did we just see a babyface? Did we just see our conquering hero, Hulk Hogan, resort to cheating? Did we just really see him resort to cheating? Like, huh? Like, there's just so much backwards booking from the babyfaces. Like, why were the babyfaces all of a sudden resorting to cheating against the heels? Like, despite the heels cheating all match, the babyfaces were the one disqualified for it by a second referee. Like, huh? Like, and that also didn't make sense. Like, why all of a sudden when the babyfaces were cheating, like, they get disqualified, but when the heels were cheating all match, like, they weren't? Like, was there instant replay back then? Like, was someone like, did they have like a monitor back then to catch the heels? But they let that slide, and then when Hulk Hogan was using that mask, oh, disqualification. Or maybe there was replay assist. There's replay assist from Stamford, Connecticut. It's expedited replay from Stamford, Connecticut. And they relayed that back to that second official. And then after further review, pal, we're going to reverse that decision. So it was just so stupid. This is that was just a stupid ass decision by Vince to have Hulk Hogan come back and then, practically lose his return match by disqualification. And then not even give Beefcake his feel good moment. Like, at least give him the tag team titles with one of his friends. Like, a friend that he ended up growing to be close with. Speaking of which, in the documentary, that was one of the focal points of it. And honestly, that was kind of a silver lining of this bad match. Despite how bad this match was, it was nice to see, in the lead up to this and during this match, Hogan and Beefcake coming to appreciate it. Beefcake having this life-threatening ski accident years ago, prior to Hogan's return. And then you have Hogan wanting to team up with Brutus to help him get his confidence back. So regardless of how I thought how bad I thought the match was, I can still appreciate, the backstory behind the friendship between these two, and how they both came together during a rough time in Beefcake's life. So, I can at least appreciate that, like even for how bad the match was, and how stupid the finish was, and even if the case was that neither of them would end up being in WWE for much longer, by that point in time. So, yeah, the match was stupid, but when you see the documentary on how their friendship and relationship unfolded between Hogan and Beefcake and how closer it actually was, I actually can appreciate it somewhat. So then we move on to the next match, and that was the narcissist, Lex Luger, taking on Mr. Perfect. So there's not much backstory to this match, but there is some important things to note about both of them, because Mr. Perfect, in contrast to previous years where he was a heel, he actually was a babyface during this time. He had turned babyface a couple months prior after some degrading comments and demands from his former manager, Bobby the Brain Heenan, and that led to a feud that lasts up to this point, where Mr. Perfect, he would keep his momentum going with strong heel work and a brief yet good rivalry with Ric Flair. Meanwhile, you have Lex Luger debut 2 months prior as the Narcissist, which consisted of him admiring himself in front of a bunch of mirrors before every match. And he would undergo an undefeated streak that saw him knock out people with his quote-unquote metal plate forearm, which was gimmicked after he had a actual motorcycle accident. But other than that, not much backstory to this match beyond Luger becoming Heenan's advisor. Heenan would actually slight Mr. Perfect by referring to Luger as beyond perfection. So when it comes to the match itself, Lex Luger probably had one of the best entrances of the day, with some very, very beautiful ladies. Like, oh my God. And then, yeah, he had that entrance with the mirrors again, but this time it had fireworks. And an interesting note from the documentary, the entrance, the fireworks were not really that great. It is actually starting to hurt people, because when they had that during the rehearsals, those fireworks were getting to people's faces. I'm assuming it was windy during that time when they were rehearsing that. So that's my guess of what was going on and why people were getting hit by the fireworks. So, yeah, when it came to Mr. Perfect, I could see why people were getting behind him. He was a good babyface. He was a very good babyface. But I mean, he's much better as a heel, in my opinion. But the Vegas fans at the time were really into his babyface role. The matchup itself, though, was middling at best. But I kind of dug into the near falls in the second half of the match, like Luger trying to cheat a pin by using his feet for leverage, but then he got caught by the referee. The finish saw both of them fighting for a backslide pin, which Luger got for the win. But this time, the referee didn't see that Perfect's feet were inside the ropes, which would have broken the count. But the referee didn't catch that. So post-match, you saw Mr. Perfect trying to argue that his feet were on the ropes that should have broken up the pin, but Luger knocked him out with the running forearm. And then somehow, some way, Mr. Perfect woke up from that in a mere minute or two, and he power walked his way backstage to attack Lex Luger, only for Shawn Michaels to attack Luger, who happened to be in the way. HBK that was, and throw some garbage cans at him, which led to their post-Mania feud after this. So like I said, the matchup itself was all right. It was nothing special, to be honest with you. There were some nice near falls, but there wasn't really much other than that from this one and done feud. And yeah, I don't really have much else to say about that. I mean, because afterwards they moved on to different things. Like I said, Mr. Perfect and HBK, they went on to have a feud. And then Lex Luger, he went on to transition to from his heel gimmick to this American Patriot babyface. So yeah, it was an interesting time for Lex Luger in just his first year in the WWF. So then we had our second to final matchup of the day, and that was The Undertaker taking on Giant Gonzalez. Who remembers the Giant Gonzalez? Which wrestling fan out there remembers the Giant Gonzalez? I certainly do, for the wrong reasons. When I watch this match, somehow, some way, it pops up my social media feed, and then even a decade ago, it just randomly pops up on YouTube. Anyway, when it comes to this matchup itself, and the story behind it, well, Undertaker and Paul Bearer, his manager, they've been feuding with other manager Harvey Whippleman since the summer of 1992, and in their recent encounter, Undertaker beat Whippleman's client Kamala in their blow-off match at Survivor Series of that year in a coffin match, which led to Whippleman seeking revenge. So Whippleman got such in the form of introducing his new client, the near 7'7" tall Giant Gonzalez, at the 1993 Royal Rumble match, and attacked and eliminated The Undertaker despite not being an official participant, which led to this match. And boy, when you look at the Giant Gonzalez, despite their best attempts to sell him as this big and fearing near 8-foot monster, dude, the man was so stiff. The man was like, couldn't move at all. He's just not that convincing in the ring. And he wore this really strange bodysuit. And if you watch the documentary, they have like this concept art of Giant Gonzalez. It is just such a strange, like, gimmick. Like, he had this bodysuit that had fur, like, in various places all over his body. Like, was he supposed to resemble Bigfoot? Like, was the man supposed to resemble Bigfoot? Like, well, what exactly was this supposed to be? But, oh my lord, just when you thought the gimmick was bad, like, God, this match was, it's so even worse. But let's talk about the positive first, because like the match, we can go on about it. Like, the only positive from this match to take away from was the entrance. Undertaker's entrance was so damn cool. It was so badass. He came out in a chariot, and he had that crow. And interesting thing about the crow is that Undertaker was so scared about the crow pooping on him. Like, yeah, I mean, I would be scared too about that crow going haywire on me if I had to make that kind of entrance. But thankfully, in the live portion, it didn't. But yeah, that was the only cool thing about this match, because God, this match sucked. This was like one of the worst WrestleMania matches in history. Even if you're a casual viewer, you would tell yourself this match sucked. Like, because Gonzalez, like I said, he can't move. He can barely do anything other than clotheslines, big boots, and chokeholds, and a very awkward looking chokeslam. And all of that was pretty much used in 2 minutes, other than the awkward chokeslam. Like, he pretty much used his entire moveset in less than 2 minutes into this match. And this match was like 7 minutes. 7 minutes too long, in my opinion. And I guess Gonzalez's moveset was so limited because, well, he's like nearly 8 feet. Like, you can only do so much at 8 feet. And now, again, I'm no wrestler, but you just think to yourself, what can you really do? What can you really do at nearly 8 feet? I'm just asking someone out there. So Undertaker absolutely had nothing to work with here. He rallied late until Harvey Whippleman got on the apron and threw a cloth in the ring without the referee looking. And that cloth consisted of chloroform, as the commentators pointed out, as Gonzalez choked Undertaker out with it, and the ref disqualified Gonzalez for it, for not breaking the count, while also having an illegal cloth to put Undertaker at 3-0 at WrestleMania via a disqualification. Yeah, like the only win by disqualification. Yeah, the one notch on the Undertaker streak that has an asterisk on it. So post-match, you have the officials checking and carrying Undertaker out on a stretcher, while Giant Gonzalez was taunting the crowd, doing the roar that he had been doing for pretty much the entire time that he's gotten there, and also giving a referee a very awkward chokeslam. Yeah, very awkward chokeslam, but Undertaker came back out to wake up the crowd and knock Giant Gonzalez off his feet with a few clotheslines. Man, yeah, that was pretty much that. Like, when you talk about this specific WrestleMania IX, yeah, this match pretty much, like this match and the one we're about to get into, yeah, it pretty much like symbolizes like how this WrestleMania was for pretty much all the wrong reasons. Like all the wrong reasons. Like a lot of the matches were pretty bad. Like they were pretty bad before this one, but this was easily the worst. This was pretty the worst of them all, because Gonzalez was such a bad wrestler. He was so severely limited, both as a wrestler and a character. Undertaker stood no chance. Like, what could you really do with this? Like, what could you really do with this? Now, Undertaker tried to do something with it. He tried to make the most of it, but again, what could you really do with this? Like, in the lead up to it, there's nothing. In the match, nothing. Nothing to note in the match happened. And the finish completely killed the crowd until the post-match stuff, where they kind of came back to life when Undertaker knocked down Giant Gonzalez. But there's absolutely nothing. And I had no clue that these two had a rematch at SummerSlam later that year. But honestly, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to look up how that went. But yeah, this match was so bad. It was so bad that it's no wonder that not only it's an easy contender for one of the worst WrestleMania matches of all time, but it's no wonder Undertaker is so vocal about Giant Gonzalez to this day. The man sucked. The man sucked. And yeah, the more we can forget about this match, the better. So now we move on to our main event of a very, like, I don't know what you can even say about this WrestleMania. It's like, just watching this WrestleMania is certainly something about just talking about it. So now we can talk about the main event. And that was the WWF champion, Bret the Hitman Hart, taking on Yokozuna. So Yokozuna and Bret Hart were two of the several stars that the WWF was heavily pushing in 1992 as part of the WWF's incoming new generation era, where the Yokozuna debuting earlier in the year and going on this dominant heel run, and the latter being Bret Hart winning the WWF title in October of that year. So Yokozuna won the 1993 Royal Rumble match, which was the first ever Royal Rumble match to give the winner a guaranteed world championship match at WrestleMania. So during the build-up for this match, Yokozuna continued his dominance by, quote-unquote, injuring Hacksaw Jim Duggan with 4 bonsai drops when they had a match where Jim Duggan was trying to tackle and successfully take down Yokozuna. And yeah, that angered Yokozuna, and that led to him injuring Jim Duggan. And he also dropped one on Bret Hart during their contract signing a couple days out before WrestleMania. So, looking at Yokozuna, even though he was kind of limited, actually really limited in the ring due to his size, he actually really knew how to draw massive heat. Both him and Mr. Fuji, they were actually very solid, if not good heels. Like, take the Jim Duggan injury angle, for example. After Jim Duggan got the crowd super hyped after, tackling down Yokozuna came right back and then, made the crowd hate him for taking down the American hero. So before the match started, Mean Gene Okerlund interviewed Hulk Hogan, and oh boy, perhaps it served as a red herring to what was to come soon. While Hulk Hogan told Bret that he and the other Hulkamaniacs were supporting him, brother. He won first crack at whoever walked out WrestleMania 9 with the WF title as Hogan posed, "What you gonna do, brother, when this interview ends? Running wild on you." Yeah, perhaps a signal to what was gonna happen by the end of the night. So the match saw Bret being at a major disadvantage from the start because obviously Yokozuna was much bigger, but surprisingly, Bret got much more offense in than Yokozuna because, well, he had the speed, the technicality, and he had a bunch more offense in. He had put in a bunch of aerial moves in. He outsmarted the big man in general. So yeah, it was all about speed and smarts for the Hitman. But the turning point in this match saw Bret push Yokozuna into an exposed turnbuckle that allowed him to lock in the sharpshooter. But Yokozuna was on the verge of actually tapping out until Mr. Fuji threw salt in Bret's eyes. And because the ref was trying to see if Yokozuna was going to tap out, the ref didn't catch the salt that was thrown in Bret's eyes. And that allowed Yokozuna to pin Bret Hart off that 1, 2, 3. Yokozuna is your new WWF champion. Yep, no bonsai drop or anything else. Bret jobbed out to the salt. But outside of watching this Steiner's match much earlier and the dark match that we talked about much earlier, I'd say, the match itself, ending aside, that's probably, I'd say the most decent thing from what ended up being a very terrible pay-per-view. Yeah, this WrestleMania 9 sucked. This absolutely sucked. And I'll get to my final thoughts on the pay-per-view itself, but, leading up to this match and the match itself, yeah, WrestleMania 9 sucked. So let's get into the rest of my thoughts, though, on what the rest of the show unfolded. Because, yeah, Yokozuna put on a decent match despite his limitations. Bret did really well here, even though what unfolded and what was about to unfold wasn't going to set well for him at all. Speaking of which, Mr. Fuji, that salt led right into probably what was going to be the most infamous endings in WrestleMania history, because out came Hulk Hogan, brother, and he was talking to the referee what happened. He told the referee there was salt in Bret's eyes. Mr. Fuji threw salt in Bret's eyes, so he checked on Bret Hart. While he was checking on Bret Hart, Mr. Fuji challenged Hulk Hogan to a WWF title match right on the spot. And Hogan was like, "What do I do, brother? What do I do, brother?" He was like all over the ring. He was all over ringside saying, brother, what do I do?" And then Bret encouraged him to accept it. Hogan rushed the ring. He was getting attacked by Yokozuna. He was held up by Yokozuna. And Mr. Fuji was getting ready to throw that damn salt. Hogan dodged the salt from Mr. Fuji that hit Yokozuna. And then one clothesline later from Hogan and one leg drop later from Hogan to hit Yokozuna in just 22 seconds. Hogan became your new WWE champion just like that, brother. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. Before there was the heist of the century at WrestleMania 31 by Seth Rollins, there was the brothering of the century at WrestleMania 9 in Las Vegas by one Hulk Hogan. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. Hulk Hogan used his brother in the bank, the brothering card, that doesn't work for me, brother, on Vince McMahon. Whatever you want to call it. Yes, Hulk Hogan pulled the ultimate brothering at WrestleMania 9. Now, some people say, "Oh, this saved WrestleMania." I mean, that's debatable. In my opinion, yeah, in the short term. But in the long term, oh boy. It did some damaging effects. Because this was supposed to set up a new generation. This is supposed to set up a new generation for the WWF. And I get it. Like, Vince wasn't really that trustworthy. He wasn't yet that ready to, be saddled in with his new crop of stars. So he pleaded for Hulk Hogan, which understandably, because Hogan was popular, still at the height of his popularity at the time. He was still popular. Well, I take that back. Hulk Hogan was still popular at the time, but he didn't have that star presence that he did in the last couple of years up to that point. Now, I'm not saying he was still very popular, but at that time he's facing scrutiny as well for his use of steroids. So, and he was also in some pretty meh movies. Now, when it came to the finish of this match, the finish of WrestleMania, there have been multiple interviews by both sides on what led to this. Bret said that Hogan refused to drop the title to him. And then Hogan said that Vince would have him drop the title back to Yokozuna at the first ever King of the Ring pay-per-view in June that year, which ended up being the case. And that ended up being the move, which, again, what was the point? What was the point? So, again, regardless of what each man said, it was clear and obvious from a fan perspective that Hogan uses politics to reclaim the WWF title and drop it to a top heel. So, it's, again, what was the point of establishing Yokozuna as this giant dominant monster, only to have the brothering go into effect? So, yeah, it created this happy ending, but it's just like, damn, at the cost of your monster dominant heel that was made to look stupid on the grandest stage of them all. So, anyway, there's some good intentions to be had for Yokozuna to win the title off of Hulk Hogan, who didn't even show up on TV after that, I believe. Yeah, because when you look afterwards, Bret Hart did win the title at the next WrestleMania. Still did a good amount of damage to both Bret Hart and Yokozuna, because just like with Cody Rhodes, just like with Roman Reigns, like a couple decades later, you didn't know if they were going to win the title again. You didn't know if they were going to be in that spot again. So yeah, you had a lot of questions, and I get the other side of things. Like with Bret Hart, he didn't have that confidence. Some people didn't feel like he was ready to be in that spot, but at the same time, you just didn't know. You didn't know if you didn't try. Plus, again, Hogan just got back to at that time, and while he was still popular, again, he wasn't as popular as his prior years because he wasn't there all the time, and the ongoing steroid allegations at the time. So overall, when you look at the finish to this WrestleMania, and I know my thoughts were all over the place at that finish. When you look at the finish to this WrestleMania, it was a happy ending for a lot of people in attendance and for some people at home as well. But when you look at the long game of things at the time, it set the WWF back months. It set them back months as they were trying to establish this new generation. Especially considering that, again, Hulk Hogan wasn't there in the previous in the months leading up to King of the Ring. So some final things I want to touch on when it comes to the documentary. I also backtracking a bit. When it comes to the documentary, when it comes to this match, the wrestlers themselves were also stunned. Some calling it a slap to the face, some calling it business. Bret found out the 2 days prior about the ending, clearly upset about it. Hogan tried to claim it as knowing ahead of time. Again, I found it to be BS. So yeah, again, it's a shock ending. That while it sent fans home happy, it did nothing beneficial in the short term. Going back to my final thoughts on the documentary, I found some things pretty interesting. Like, when they were filming that documentary that was eventually released, when they were filming that initially, a lot of the wrestlers did not like being filmed, and understandably so, because that was a time where the wrestlers were trying to protect their characters. They're trying to protect the kayfabe aspect of pro wrestling, because it was a time where the internet was not yet established. There's no Twitter, there's no Instagram, no TikTok, aka the pre-social media age. So guys like The Undertaker, guys like Yokozuna, they were trying hard to protect their characters, their personas, their larger than life personalities. They were really trying to protect the business. Some guys like Brett, they were cool with it whenever those tapes released. So yeah, I found that to be very insightful. There's some other things that were also pretty insightful as well, like the WWF and the city of Las Vegas already having an established relationship prior to this WrestleMania, especially having their own getting involved in a particular boxing match, which did strong success, and an episode of Primetime Wrestling 3 years later after that. And then the year prior to this WrestleMania, WrestleMania IX, that is, former WWE executive Basil DeVito, they didn't explain what exactly his role was in this documentary. He went into detail about how this WrestleMania was lacking, the previous WrestleMania was lacking something, and then by going to Vegas for WrestleMania 9 at the time, pretty much how I said it much earlier, when it came to Vince, it would inject some energy back, especially when during that time, the city of Las Vegas itself didn't have much of its own identity. Even with all the themed casinos and all that, they didn't have a sports identity. All they had was the University of Las Vegas Rebels. Like, they didn't have the Vegas Golden Knights at the time. They didn't have the WNBA basketball team. They didn't have the, well, soon to be incoming Las Vegas Athletics. Yeah, that baseball team that, the MLB is going to abandon Oakland for. But I digress. They also don't have the Raiders at the time. So, yeah, Las Vegas didn't have its own identity. And by bringing WrestleMania to Vegas at the time, again, it would inject some energy and identity. So another interesting note was that after tickets went on sale in November, I touched on this earlier, sales immediately slowed down. They only had 2,000 tickets sold. And again, it had a lot of that had to do with so many new wrestlers at the time. And there were barely any Golden Era stars. And, well, those tickets went back up when they announced Hulk Hogan for the show. Probably one of the best parts about this documentary too, and just the whole WrestleMania in general, this one, which was very few and far, was the construction process for the whole outdoor arena. I found it to be one of the lone bright spots of this WrestleMania, because they had to basically do everything, including the bleachers, from scratch. And this whole WrestleMania set cost Vince McMahon over $100,000. Which, again, goes to show just how far and beyond Vince is willing to go to put on one of the best shows possible, at least during that time, of course, even during the darkest days for WWE. So one final note on just how disappointing, disastrous this WrestleMania was for them was when you had to see just how chaotic, just even letting people in was bad. It was a disaster. Like, DeVito noted that he and Linda McMahon had to go and help the ticketers let people in. They had to help them because it just got so chaotic. Like, they only let them in 15 minutes prior. I'm like, wow, really? It's like, dang. So the overall documentary itself, I'd say it's a solid, interesting watch to see the process in pre-planning this WrestleMania, especially the set and the sales aspects. But I'd say the second and the last quarter part of it, it's okay. I mean, if you want to hear the wrestlers' perspectives on, the show itself and their respective matches, but it's not really what to write home about. So overall, when you look back at WrestleMania IX, regardless if you watched the documentary or not, even having watched the documentary to coincide with this WrestleMania, it's still memorable for all the wrong reasons. Like, the story building prior to this was either it was just fine, but for most of it, it was non-existent. And when the matches actually happened, nearly all of them were either really bad or outright terrible, which, yeah, it was pretty much the theme of the whole night. With some of those matches having very questionable booking decisions, you'll see even if you're new to watching wrestling, especially the ending of this WrestleMania and the booking of one particular wrestler, that being Hulk Hogan. Now, for as much as I like Hulk Hogan and how popular he was, his booking specifically at this WrestleMania was really dumb. It was really stupid at the time, both in the tag team match and his brothering of the century running wild. Yeah, some will say that it saved this WrestleMania for both the WWF and the city of Las Vegas. It didn't do much for the company at the time because, well, his title run ended up being short term and he wasn't there for half of the time on TV. It only lasted till King of the Ring with the fuck finish. And then he sat out the rest of his contract until the end of 1993 before he jumped ship over to WCW. So I again ask, what was the point of having Hulk Hogan save WrestleMania, this one particularly, only to not really do much with it in the long run? I mean, sure, it was a short-term injection, but the long game, what was the point? Because WWE would still sink until a couple more years. So, well, yeah, I still, at this point, for right now, at least, it's the worst WrestleMania of all time that I can remember, that I've seen. This show is very awful, very bad booking decisions. Most of the show is very bad with very few bright spots. And speaking of those bright spots, there's very few of them, but I could still appreciate them for what they are. The presentation, very grand. Vince went balls to the walls with it to make it such. Like the theme, I really liked it. I really liked the theme of, the Roman theme. Like, it's so thematic. Like, that was a smart decision by Vince. It matched the theme of Caesar's Palace. Like, it's just so grand. Like, even if some people didn't like the decision to have Jim Ross and Grill Monsoon and others being the toga, I thought it really fit in. And then you even had the live animals, even for as disastrous as that could have been. I thought it was a bold power play. I thought it was a bold decision to go with it, and it worked out in the end. So the presentation, I thought it was great. Jim Ross, for as bad as his partners were Bobby the Brain Heenan was all right, but Macho Man Randy Savage, not so much. Jim Ross, for his first day on the job at that time, he was actually good in his WWF debut. But other than that, not a lot of positives to what was probably the worst WrestleMania of all time, from what I saw at least. Now, there's probably a couple more WrestleManias that are considered the worst of all time, but from what I've seen from this one, definitely the worst. Definitely the worst from what I've seen. I wouldn't really recommend you watch this at all, unless you're daring and bold enough to sit through it. It's just to see how bad this is, or you want to see this first before seeing the new documentary that's on Peacock right now. Now, since this upcoming WrestleMania is returning to Las Vegas in short order with WrestleMania 41, we have to ask ourselves the bigger question that's going to come to play. Will history repeat itself 32 years later as WrestleMania returns to Vegas? Well, that remains to be seen. But with the build-up we've been getting so far with WrestleMania 41 in Vegas under Triple H, it's starting to head. It's been heading that way so far, and from what I've seen, it's gonna look that way. So, yeah, that is my thoughts. That is my retro review of WrestleMania 9, as well as my thoughts on the behind the spectacle, WrestleMania 9 behind a spectacle documentary that just released. I mean, yeah, I thought the documentary was a solid watch, and contrast to the actual show itself from over 30 years ago, because yeah, that WrestleMania was terrible, atrocious. But again, very few bright spots, but the bright spots can't be outdone by all the negatives that were on this show, like spread throughout. But I'd like to know your thoughts. Let's start up a conversation on this particular WrestleMania 9. And let me bring up the question to you again. Will history repeat itself in Las Vegas for the WWE as WrestleMania 41 nears and appears? So let's strike up a conversation. Let me know your takes on WrestleMania 9 in the comments on YouTube, or slide into the DMs on socials at Vere Cold Lasagna, or comment on the post that's promoting this episode, however you want to do it. Well, let's strike up that conversation on my socials and on the comments on YouTube, and wherever you want to do it. But that is going to wrap up this episode of Vere Cold Lasagna, episode number 265 of this icy yet spicy sports podcast. And that's going to do it for our retro road to WrestleMania, as the final pit stop was in Las Vegas for this retro review of WrestleMania 9. I have been your host, Dylan Lasagna, wrapping up episode number 265. And until then, keep the lasagna very cold in the fridge. Your takes on the world of sports. And until I see you, when I see you in the next episode, peace out.